Thanks for staying with us this morning. We're in Manhattan at the Farm Bureau office, and we're joined by Terry Holdren, who's the CEO and General Counsel. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Because that is a mouthful.
It is.
Okay. Thanks for joining us this morning, Terry. What a great summer for you already.
Yeah.
You got to go out and spend some time with some Kansas State students and got to travel rural Kansas.
We did. We're seeing great wheat harvest as well, so it's been good so far, yeah.
Being out in rural Kansas, there's a lot of needs that rural Kansas has, especially when it comes to agriculture. What are some of the things you saw?
So one of the things, we try to do is take leaders, decision makers, whenever we can, out to see rural Kansas agriculture, just to understand the needs. Spent a couple of days with folks from K-State, the president and the deans of the College of Ag and the vet school, looking at mostly things that they would then see back on campus, right? So we toured some feedlots, talked to some livestock producers, swine, beef cattle producers, and just got a sense of what they were facing from a labor perspective, from some of the needs they have just in terms of staffing, vet shortages that are going on. We've talked a long time about the need for large animal vets. So those kinds of things, but also then seeing dairy production as well, talking about water infrastructure and the governor's vision for the future of water in Kansas and what that means for production agriculture in terms of consumption and conservation and some of those kinds of things. It was a great couple of days. I think we saw a lot and covered a lot of space, hopefully giving them a better sense of what they can do from the university perspective to better equip students who then go back out and enter the workforce across the state.
Well, let's talk about one of those. Let's talk about labor. We know the new administration is making a push to build a wall, and they are deporting a lot of people. And it doesn't matter what administration you're, Republican or Democrat. It really doesn't matter. What matters is getting food to the store, to the table, and having a labor shortage is difficult for a lot of producers.
Absolutely, and labor is one of those things where, whether you're talking about immigrant labor or migrant labor, however you want to phrase that, or folks who live in and have been in the area for years and decades, we've got to have a sustainable supply of workforce there to write pens, do all of the manual labor that occurs in animal agriculture or in the industry in general. When we go up the chain just a little bit, then you get into some of the processing aspects of things, whether it's the dairy plant that's going on in Garden City or any of the other,
whatever it might be.
Beef production, whatever. There's got to be a workforce there. And what we have seen over and over is just a lack of sustainable ability. The Trump administration, I think they're getting better, but came out talking about the wall, talking about some really restrictive things that more than anything else cause folks to be afraid. And that doesn't work in that system. So helping folks understand what's the structure, how do I maintain legal status if that's the case, or how do I enter that workforce is important to us and important to the industry.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about shortage of large animal vets and maybe some of the other things that are facing rural Kansas in agriculture. You're watching kansasAGreport. We'll see you in just a minute.
This segment brought to you by Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farmers and ranchers since 1919. KFB.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com. Kansas Wheat Commission, leaders in the adoption of profitable innovations for wheat. Online at kswheat.com.
Thanks for staying with us this morning. We're at Manhattan, Kansas at the Kansas Farm Bureau office. We're joined by Terry Holdren, who's the CEO and General Counsel for Kansas Farm Bureau. And we're talking about a trip you took earlier this summer and dealing with issues that face rural Kansas, especially when it comes to agriculture. And first segment, we talked about labor shortage. And this ties right in with labor shortage, which is a large animal veterinarian shortage. I know K-State puts out some of the best vets in the world. It seems that we wouldn't have a shortage here in the state of Kansas, but most of these people go back home.
Yep. And that's one of the things we talked about on the tour. We routinely and historically have had that shortage. We've done some things at the state level. There's a program you can get tuition repaid over time. The state runs. It runs about 5 or 6 students a year, which is a good number, but probably not enough. So we may need to look at expanding that. The other thing we were able to talk about with the vet school is changing, and they've already begun reviewing the process of their admissions programs. How do we get to a system where some percentage, 50% or better of the students at the vet school actually come from Kansas. So we make sure that we're recruiting local talent. Hopefully those stay local. And then the other thing is on that is, sort of how do we make sure that the industry, in terms of agriculture, is doing a better job of recruiting those students. So we don't historically interact real frequently, but maybe we need to step that up, create internship opportunities, do other things to introduce those folks to the opportunities in rural Kansas so that we can retain them when they're done with school.
Well, I've spent lots of times at the veterinarian school, and one of the things you always hear from vet students is, I can deal with a parakeet or a snake or a turtle and make the same amount of money as preg checking a herd of cattle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the work environment is very difficult. So let's jump over to water. I know the governor has a 50-year water plan for the state, which he put in place about 3 years ago. Tracy Streeter does a great job over at that department. It's vital that we have basically a supply of water for crops, dairy, and everything else that goes on.
Yeah, so one of the things we're able to do is just highlight some of the work that Tracy and the Water Office folks have done in terms of technology. Spent a little bit of time on a couple of technology farms looking at the improvements in irrigation delivery, some of the moisture probes and other things that we've been able to use, that there's money available for that folks can acquire through the EQIP program or in other ways to better manage the water resource. So hopefully those things, in some of those instances we've already seen benefits from the implementation of that technology. If you go to the Sheridan 6 Lima, one of the programs that came out of that vision, they're seeing great results in terms of sustainable use and sustainable water levels in the aquifer. So just expanding what those do. Interest is growing. It takes time to get folks educated and ready to jump in on those, and hopefully we're making really good progress, and that is important.
Do people in rural Kansas sometimes feel like they're less forgotten when we're talking about Topeka, Wichita, and parts of Kansas City, or do they feel like they've got their voices heard and they just quietly go about doing what they do on a daily basis?
I think a lot of rural Kansans like living in rural Kansas because of the freedom and the ability to do what they love to do that it gives them. It's certainly true of our members, farmers and ranchers across the state. I think most of them generally know how to make their voice heard. Sometimes, we as organizations need more help in having folks step up and do that. Right. Engagement, activity. But overall, if you look at the work of the legislature, what the governor has been supportive of, even at the congressional level, a lot of times rural Kansas has a bigger voice than we think we do. Right. And a lot of those actions that government takes anyway are directly connected to the wishes and what rural Kansas needs to succeed. So we've got to continue to tell that story. Right. But we can do it successfully when we do.
Well, not only that, when you look at that, trade being a major issue, talking on the federal level and state level as well, transportation being a major issue here in the state of Kansas, roads, highways, county roads. I mean, everything plays a huge role in getting food, fiber, and fuels into market.
Yeah, and you've got to just continually be engaged and active in making sure that those concerns are vocalized and that folks are aware of what it's going to take, because there are disconnects between, you mentioned, some of the more urban parts of the state. Those are there, but we can bridge those gaps if we're active and aggressive.
I mean, that's the whole thing about Farm Bureau, is a voice of agriculture. I mean, you hear it all the time. You are the voice of agriculture. Terry, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
It was very nice to meet you.